Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Hare Krishna, welcome. It's October 11th, 2020, and we're studying Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 5, entitled Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. Text 7. We're in text 7 of chapter 5 of Bhagavad Gita. I'm here at my home ashram in Alachua, Florida, with Keith, Garuda, and Payal.
My owner is my owner.
Here online, I heard Nalini or Subal, one of them, and there's Prampradas and Rukmini, Kim Molnar, Ladini Shakti, Damayanti, Daru Brahma, Lakshmi Priya, Bhakti George, Ashwani, Malini, Eze, and Narayan, and Sarah Thompson. Welcome, everyone. Good to be with you. All right, so Bhagavad Gita, the title of the book means Song of God or Song of the Supreme. And so it's essentially a sublime philosophical treatise in the form of a dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna. Happened about 5,000 years ago, a little more than that. So text 7, we'll start with the word for word. We'll start with the Sanskrit words. Yoga yukto Vishuddhatma Dijitatma Jitendriya Sarvabhutatma Bhutatma Korbanapina Lipyate Yoga yukto Vishuddhatma Dijitatma Jitendriya Sarva Bhutatma Bhutatma Korbanapina Lipyate Yoga yukto Vishuddhatma Dijitatma Jitendriya Sarva Bhutatma Bhutatma Korbanapina Lipyate Yoga yukto Vishuddhatma Dijitatma Jitendriya Sarva Bhutatma Bhutatma Korbanapina Lipyate. Would someone else like to chant the verse?
Yoga yukto Vishuddhatma
Yoga yukto Vishuddhatma
Dijitatma Jitendriya
Dijitatma Jitendriya
Sarvabhutatma Bhutatma
Sarvabhutatma Bhutatma
Korbanapina Lipyate
Korbanapina Lipyate. Would anyone online like to lead the verse chanting?
Yoga yukto Vishuddhatma
Yoga yukto Vishuddhatma
Dijitatma Jitendriyaha
Vijitatma Jitendriyaha
Sarvabhutatma Bhutatma
Sarvabhutatma Bhutatma
Urvanapina Lipyate
Uvanapina Lipyate
Yoga yukto Vishuddhatma
Yoga
Yukto Vishuddhatma
Dijitatma Jitendriyaha
Vijitatma Jitendriyaha
Sarvabhutatma Bhutatma
Sarvabhutatma Bhutatma
Bhuvanapi Nalipyate
Today.
Yoga Yukto Vishuddhatma
Yoga Yukto Vishuddhatma
Vijitatma Jitendriya
Yujitatma Jitendriya
Sarvabhutatma Bhutatma
Sarvabhutatma Bhutatma
Bhuvanapi Nalipyate
Kurvanapi Analipyate.
So you know, Dhira, you're muted.
Yoga Yukta Yudu Sama
Yoga Yukto Vishuddhatma
Vijitatma Jatendriya
Vijitatma Jitendriya
Sarvabhutama Bhutatma
Sarvabhutatma Bhutatma
Kurvanapi Nalipyate.
Kurvanapi Nalipyate. Yoga Yukta, engaged in devotional service. Vishuddha Atma, a purified soul. Vijita Atma, self-controlled. Jita Indriya, having conquered the senses. Sarva Bhuta Atma Bhuta Atma. Compassionate to all living entities. Korvanapi, although engaged in work. Na, never. Lipyate, is entangled. Translation. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. One who is on the path of liberation by Krishna consciousness is very dear to every living being, and every living being is dear to him. This is due to his Krishna consciousness. Such a person cannot think of any living being as separate from Krishna, just as the leaves and branches of a tree are not separate from the tree. He knows very well that by pouring water on the root of the tree, the water will be distributed to all the leaves and branches, or by supplying food to the stomach, the energy is automatically distributed throughout the body. Because one who works in Krishna consciousness is servant to all, he is very dear to everyone. And because everyone is satisfied by his work, he is pure in consciousness. Because he is pure in consciousness, his mind is completely controlled. And because his mind is controlled, his senses are also controlled. Because his mind is always fixed on Krishna, there is no chance of his being deviated from Krishna. Nor is there a chance that he will engage his senses in matters other than the service of the Lord. He does not like to hear anything except topics relating to Krishna. He does not like to eat anything which is not offered to Krishna, and he does not wish to go anywhere if Krishna is not involved. Therefore, his senses are controlled. A man of controlled senses cannot be offensive to anyone. One may ask, why then was Arjuna offensive in battle to others? Wasn't he in Krishna consciousness? Arjuna was only superficially offensive because, as has already been explained in the second chapter, all the assembled persons on the battlefield would continue to live individually, as the soul cannot be slain. So spiritually, no one was killed on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Only their dresses were changed by the order of Krishna, who was personally present. Therefore, Arjuna, while fighting on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, was not really fighting at all. He was simply carrying out the orders of Krishna in full Krishna consciousness. Such a person is never entangled in the reactions of work. Om Jnanatirmirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Nina Bhutale Swarupa Kadamayam Darati Svapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Utapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Shri Opam Sagrajatam Sagana Raganatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitan Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sakana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpatayubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva cha Patitana Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine. Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 5, text 7. Yoga Yukto Vishuddhatma Vijitatma Jitendriya Sarva Bhutatma Korvanapi Lipyate. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. Hare Krishna. So Srila Prabhupada in the purport, he gives the watering the root of the tree metaphor. And so our nature, well, the term dharma is one of those Sanskrit terms that have become pretty well known all over the world over recent decades. So dharma means that which cannot be separated from a thing. That which cannot be separated from a thing. So as examples that Prabhupada uses, we would not say the dharma of fire is to cook. You can have fire that doesn't cook food. We would say the dharma of fire is to be hot. The dharma of sugar is to be sweet. Can't separate sweetness from sugar, heat from fire. And so our dharma as that atomic unit of sentience that is the actual self, that animates the body. Right? So this is key knowledge to understand. Who am I? Am I this body? Am I? Right? So this, the example is given here. Vasamsi Jirnani Tavihayan Navani Grinati Naro Parani Tatashirani Vihaya Jirnani Anyati Sanyati Naro Parani Navani Dehi. That just as we take off a set of clothes and get new ones. Similarly, we discard old and useless bodies and get a new body. That's happening at the end of each lifetime, and it's happening during our lifetime, right? We were all wearing a set of clothes as a 5-year-old, as teenagers. Well, that set of clothes is gone, and we have a new set of clothes. And according to the consciousness we develop, we're forming our next body. Yam yam vapi smran bhavam tajatyante kalevram tam tam eveti konti asadatad bhava bhavita. So the dharma of the spirit soul is to serve. Sugar is sweet, fire is hot. Spirit soul, we will serve. There's a song by Bob Dylan. You got to serve somebody. Got to serve somebody. I think he was going through a Christian stage. He was very absorbed in Jesus. So he wrote this song, you got to serve somebody. Okay, so that is true. We are going to serve. We're going to work. We're going to serve. So spiritual life. I remember once it was was a Sofoto foundational seminar, and there was someone in the seminar, and somehow the processing, I think it was on day 2, was very much around, got to very spiritual service topics. And so the participants were going on break, and she was a young lady, young woman, maybe in her 20s, maybe early 30s. And she just had some conception that the idea, well, when we become enlightened, we realize that we're God, we're the master. But then she was getting that, like, that's not where I was coming from, even though I wasn't directly talking about it. It wasn't a Bhakti Yoga program, it was a foundational seminar, which is covertly a Bhakti Yoga program, as you've all come to realize, but that's another conversation. Okay, so anyhow, but just she was going on break, and I was standing by the door, and she said, well, is the idea of this self-realization that we become God. I mean, that's the idea, right? And because that's what she had heard and absorbed at the yoga center or whatever. I said, no, that's not our idea here. And she said, well, what's your idea? I said, the idea is we realize, not we become, we realize ourselves as servants of God, So that's, so do we. And a servant, the more, that's a theme of this verse here. The more we realize ourselves as servants of God, actually realize, not just intellectually, then we become godly, right? So the idea is not to try to artificially become God, but yes, to become godly. And then that's Prabhupada's kind of, well, no, Krishna is referencing, Krishna is giving the same message as the Goswamis. Krishna Kirtana Gana Nartana Paral Premamritambo Nidhi Dhira Dhira Jana Priya Karal Dirmat Sarao Pujitao Shri Chaitanya Kripa Baral Bhuvi Bhuvo Bhavarahantara Kal Vande Upasanatana Raghu Yugao Shri Jiva Gopalaka. That's a verse that describes the Goswamis. They were very dear to everyone. They were dear to the ruffians, the criminal class. They were dear to the Brahmins and the gentle class. They were very dear to everyone. And that's what the one who works in devotion, who is a pure soul and who controls his mind and senses, is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a person is never entangled. And so, like sometimes it is said about parenting. A parent treats all of their children equally by treating them differently, right? Maybe one child at one time needs some gentle, forgiving encouragement, and maybe the same child or another child at another time. The way to love them is tough love. Maybe chastisement, maybe discipline, maybe you're on timeout or whatever it is. So the purpose, so the principle here is that our nature is to serve. And so in serving the root of the tree, just like we water the root of the tree, then all the branches, leaves and twigs are nourished, they're satisfied. That's the process. The branches, leaves, and twigs, that relates to the families, the communities, the races, the genders, the nationalities. We can try to separately water and serve each branch, leaf, and twig, but that's not the process. Even those branches don't get satisfied, right? Like, we really want to serve everyone, not just all people, but all species. Some of you heard my story. I remember my graduate degrees are in the field of social work, and I remember reading about the mother of modern social work. Her name is Jane Addams. So I learned a lot about her in social work graduate programs, Jane Addams. So I was reading about Jane Addams, and something I found. So she was from an affluent American family in Chicago, right? So she didn't need to work. She didn't need to worry about the necessities of life. So she had a life of leisure in the 1800s, mid 1800s, okay? And then she was taking a trip to Spain with some friends, and she was in Spain. And in Spain, so she's the mother of modern social work, Jane Adams. And so in Spain, they went to a bullfight. That's something one does in Spain, even 200 years ago. And anyhow, so she was there, and it's like a life of leisure. Let us enjoy this bullfight. And she was horrified. She was disgusted. She was nauseated to see what they were doing to the animals. She was disgusted. And it changed her life. Now, this is very little known. I mean, I found it in some, somewhat obscure article in biography. And she was disgusted. And so out of the compassion that she connected with, she started this whole new profession of social work. She opened what's called the Whole House in Chicago. And that was the beginning of, again, the modern social work. Okay, so then I noticed that. And then maybe I was reading about this in the mid to late 90s. So I did a research of all the social work literature, all the articles. And I would go to the library and search all of the databases of journal articles, books. And social work, maybe probably more than any other profession, it is the profession that advocates against isms, sexism, racism, nationalism, like that. And I didn't find one thing, nothing, zero, absolutely zero, on speciesism in the field of social work, So I wrote an article called Social Work and Speciesism, and somehow it got published in the journal called Social Work, which is like the top journal in the field, like professors who are professors for 20 years, they try to get an article published in that journal. Somehow they just accepted this. It was called Social Work and Speciesism. And I said, maybe Jane Addams was wrong, and maybe she just got it wrong, and there was no basis for that sentimental compassion she was feeling when she saw the bulls being tortured. Maybe she just got it wrong. Let's look at that. And then we looked at it, and we looked at so many things. Making the thing that, this discussion belongs in this field. If this field is like against the isms, so why only serve humanity? What about, I serve all people, and okay, what about this dead cow, chicken, and pig on my dinner plate? Like that. Okay. So to serve the root of, so our nature is to serve. We're not going to get away with that. We're not going to get away from that. And the question is, where will we direct our propensity for work? Where will we direct our propensity for service? And to direct it anywhere other than watering the root of the tree will be entangled. This is what Krishna is saying. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. Right? We get entangled in karma if we direct our service propensity somewhere else. To direct our propensity for service, to serve the root of the tree, or another analogy, for the hand to serve the food to the stomach, right? If the hand says, I'll be the master, I'll be the direct enjoyer. The hand is meant to enjoy secondarily. Hand serves the stomach, then all parts of the body, including the hand, is nourished. If the hand thinks, why should I serve the stomach? I will enjoy the food on my own. It's kind of an obnoxious affair, right? It's kind of an obnoxious affair. And even the hand it's not the process. So we become entangled in karma, in the process of birth and death. And So this means that our direction of service, like the Goswamis, it's not based on my material ego. Okay, through material ego, I'll serve my body, my senses, maybe even my family, maybe something bigger than myself, which is nice, but it's still bodily based. If I say, well, I serve my country, I serve America, okay. Well, let's deconstruct it. Why do I want to serve America? Not that it's a bad thing to do. Why not serve Irkutsk? Anyone played Risk back 40 years ago? Yeah, there you go, Irkutsk, Irkutsk, good. I feel understood. Okay, so yeah, why not serve Irkutsk? Some of you are bewildered. Why would you want to serve Irkutsk? Okay.
Kamchatka.
And why not Kamchatka? There we go. We could go in a whole tangent here. Precisely. Well, okay, but if we deconstruct it, because what's the most important thing in this universe and all of creation? The most important thing in this universe and all of creation is this body called David Wolf. Yeah, I won't even tolerate any arguments about that. Okay, that is the most important thing. Okay, and that means that the family that this body was born in becomes the most important. The football team that this body roots for because of where I live becomes the most important. The country that this body was born in, right? So if this body was born in Kamchatka, it's like, go Kamchatka, right? So it's all about this body. This body is still the center. Still, if we're serving something bigger than ourselves, like a country or humanity, okay, well, it's something higher than animal life. It's still not going to be satisfying for the soul. Because we can think of serving so like the 6 Goswamis, the example given in the Dhira, Jana Priya Priya Karal, Nimat Saral Pujitel verse, that the service, it's not based on the body. It's not based on bodily connection. I serve this family, this cause, this nation. It's based on realizing everyone's a spirit soul. And real compassion, paradukkha dukhi, is to support everyone to realize that they're a spirit soul. Support, challenge, whatever we need to do, whether through our words, our silence, distributing prasadam, kirtan, to connect with people where they're at and support them to move towards self-realization and God consciousness, Krishna consciousness. And that's service, that's watering the root of the tree. That's service. That's not based on the body. Right? And that's why it's described here. One who's on the path of liberation by Krishna consciousness is very dear to every living being, and every living being is dear to him. Okay? So it's not like you're dear to me because you're my family. You're dear to me because we root for the same team. You're dear to me because we're in the same club in different ways. We have the same designation. No, that to the extent that we're self-realized and we realize we're not, this body is a vehicle. It certainly has its importance, just like any vehicle has its importance to get us from here to there, not to be neglected. But you're a spirit soul. And the blade of grass, inside the blade of grass, there's a spirit soul. So that spirit soul inside the blade of grass and the squirrel, and inside the body that we call Chinese or man or woman or white or black or Arab or Jew. Everyone's dear. Everyone's dear because everyone's part and parcel of God. Everyone's part and parcel of Krishna. And so then my service is how to support you to come to self-realization, for the self to turn towards itself in self-discovery and to turn towards the Supreme Personality of Godhead in a spirit of loving devotion. That's your real happiness. That's how I can show true compassion. And what that will look like will be diverse and different according to time, person, circumstance, like that. But that's the principle of everyone being dear to us and us truly being servants of everyone. That's true universalism. That's non-sectarianism. That's non-sectarian, not like, well, yeah, I serve you because you're my same species. And then even that, because even if we serve in a sectarian way, but what is that service? To what extent is our service further entangling others in illusion. And to the extent that it is, well, then it's misdirected. To the extent that it is, then the cure is more problematic and more a source of misery than the original problem. Right? So there's the analogy of like rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. Okay. So other sorts of service can be a pretty bleak analogy, right? Like, okay, so this is the Titanic, the ship's going down, but the fork should be on the left side. We're setting the dinner table, and that chair should be over there. It's kind of like, because the ship's going down means this body's going to die. Right? The spirit soul won't die. That's a point here. Abhinasi tatadviti yena sarvamidam tata. Vinashama vyasya nakaschit kotuma arhasi. Krishna says to Arjuna, know that that which pervades the entire body can never be destroyed. No one can destroy the imperishable soul. Antamanti me deha nichishokta sharirina. Anasino prameyasya tasmad yudyasva bharata. Only the material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal soul is subject to destruction. Right? So to the extent that we misidentify the self with the body, with the spirit self with matter, we will be in anxiety, guaranteed. We will be in anxiety. And to the extent that we're realizing ourselves as indestructible, not just in like a let's hype ourselves up sort of way, but realizing I am that particle of spirit that inhabits the body and nothing can hurt me, nothing can damage me, then we're fearless. Okay, the chairs on the Titanic analogy, that could be a bit harsh. So perhaps a less harsh analogy. Let's say if there's a child, and the child is wandering lost in the city. Okay. Now we find the child. So someone finds the child and goes, "Oh, you're lost. Okay, you must be hungry. Here's a piece of bread. Okay, go on now." Now, the person who gives a piece of bread to the child, it's not that they're doing no good. That's nice. Someone else says, "Oh, it's raining and cold. Come into my shop and you can be in my shop. It's warm here. You can be in my shop for half an hour." It's nice. There's some good being done. But let's say someone says, okay, let's say the child has a wealthy father, child has wealthy parents, and someone who really is really knows how to serve the child in the best way will say, okay, let me find your parents. Let me find what's your name, where do you live? Do you have some landmarks near your house? Okay, and then the parents have a very nice house. The parents have unlimited pieces of bread and shelter and warmth and affection and love, and right. So that's the real substantial way to serve the child. Okay. So that analogy, it's not as futile as rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. Like, okay, there's some good done by giving the piece of bread. So that's, different humanitarian work. If our attempts at service, if they're in the modes of passion and ignorance, we're doing more harm than good. We might feel very good about ourselves about like that. Okay. Just basic example, let's say if, yes, I want to help people. And so I was on the street and someone came to me and said he needs some money because he hasn't had crack cocaine in a week. He needs some money. I'm a good person, so I gave him, so we can understand, like, you're not really helping him. Maybe even he sold the crack cocaine to some teenagers at the high school. You're doing harm. Okay, so we can all, this is described in Bhagavad Gita. work, charity in the mode of ignorance. So if what we're trying to do is mode of ignorance and passion, and that's why to understand this science, understand this psychology, what is ignorance, what is passion, what is sattva, then we're doing more harm than good. If we're doing sattva, if what we're doing is relatively sattva, then we're doing some good. Like, okay, here's a piece of bread. Come into my shop for a half an hour. Okay, and then transcendental is really knowing. That's bhakti yoga, knowing this, knowing how in each area of our life, with each movement, with each relationship, each circumstance, how to water the root of the tree, how to truly help the child get to his wealthy father. That's bhakti yoga. That's the art and the science of bhakti yoga. Is it a prasadam piece of bread? Okay, yeah. Thank you for that, Ladini Shakti. That brings a whole nother element. And so this is how we can really care about people. Really, it's how we really care about ourselves. Really, it's really because to the extent that we as the spirit soul are engaged in this transcendental service, then we're happy. And it's like ironic, to the extent that we're serving in some other way based on the body, then we will be in anxiety. And that's another point in this. There's so much in this verse and purport that will be frustrated. The soul, we are the soul. The soul is satisfied, blissful. The soul is satisfied when without wanting anything in return. Doesn't mean we don't get something in return. We get eternal bliss. That's a pretty good reimbursement. But when the soul just unconditionally is watering the root of the tree, serving and supporting others to come to realization of who they are and come to their eternal nature. Yeah, it's for them. And that's when we naturally shine brightly. We naturally shine brightly with full enthusiasm. And then, then as described here, then naturally my mind is not tormenting me and my senses are not like wild horses, because I'm getting what's called param drishta nivartate. I'm getting that higher taste that the soul only gets by that sincere devotional service to serving Krishna, watering the root of the tree. And what makes Krishna happy? That we rack our brain. We give sincere endeavor to support others to come to their original nature too. And that we go out of our way and we get creative and we deepen our commitment to support others, to serve them, to support them to come back to their wealthy father. Then Krishna says, for such a spirit soul who's engaged in that way, no one's more dear to me than that person. That person is most dear to me. Then we have that bliss, and then we're not seeking for lower level gratifications. We have the higher taste. The example often given by Srila Prabhupada, like if a child sitting in the corner, or because a child's being punished for doing something destructive, the child cannot sit in the corner for too long without getting mischievous and destructive again. But higher intelligent parenting is, let's find something constructive for the child that's even more fun than the destructive thing. And then the child doesn't even think about the destructive thing. So that more fun option, that's bhakti yoga. And then the austerities less and less feel like austerities. Then it becomes more and more, oh, I get to rise early to chant Hare Krishna. I get to read Bhagavad Gita. I get to take prasadam. I get to chant japa. Because the soul is experiencing that higher taste. And so, okay, I'll read the verse again. Yoga yukto vishuddhatma vijitatma jitendriya. Sarva bhutatma bhutatma korvanapi na lipyate. One who works in devotion, who is a pure soul, and who controls his mind and senses is dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. Though always working, such a man is never entangled. Hare Krishna, thanks for your presence and attention. Thank you. I welcome any comments or questions. Garuda Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, dear Govinda, for your class. I'm appreciating in this verse the word dear. It's dear to everyone, and everyone is dear to him. And and I guess over the years I've been just thinking of like seeing equal vision.
Yeah.
With like the other living entities and just humanity at large and everything, just seeing equal vision. But I for some reason I didn't really connect to this word dear. It's like, it's really sweet. Like it's a sweet, like
sweet, yeah.
Mood and way of being toward all the living entities and life itself. Like I'm just really appreciating that mood with this verse.
The sweetness, the sweetness of like what is communicated with that word dear. Very, very tender.
Yeah. Just thinking about like seeing equal vision and like, okay, like everyone's a spirit soul, all the living entities. And like, how can I serve them? But like coming from a place of like, no, they're dear to me. And it's just like, I'm just really, I don't know. I feel like I need to like really digest it and like be with that experience. I feel like it's like a new way of approaching the world. And I don't know, I'm just kind of, it's like bringing up some emotions for me and like it's like stirring up some like, I don't know, this feeling of like, just like, kind of getting out of like my mind kind of feeling. Like if everyone's equal and I'm like approaching life that way, it kind of like feels more like I'm in my head. But this feels like heartfelt, like I'm like connecting with my heart.
There's tender emotion accompanying your experience with this verse.
Yeah, and I'm just really appreciating that. And I don't know what else to say except for I feel like this is like a big deal for me. Like there's something about this that's like, it's really kind of, it's like stirring up some emotions and like, almost maybe like I'm longing for that like experience, and I'm not there. I'm not like, I feel like maybe I get into my head maybe with the way I approach life and the way I'm experiencing things. And I'm just really appreciating it. So that's what I have to share.
Thanks for sharing. I'm moved to some emotion too by hearing your sharing. I'm moved to some realization. I'm really inspired because Garuda is referring to 5.18. 5.18. That verse is Bija Vinaya Sampane Brahmane Gavi Hastini Shuniche Vasva Pakecha Pandita Samadarshina. The humble sage, by virtue of true knowledge, sees with equal vision a learned and gentle Brahmin, a cow, an elephant, a dog, and a dog eater or outcast. So that verse that's the equal vision verse. Prabhupada often quotes it. And yeah, so I've been reading these verses for 40 years or whatever, and I'm getting new realization and hearing your sharing just a minute ago. Yes, so that verse, it's about knowledge. Let's develop this vision. And that's wonderful, because I didn't have any vision like that before I came to Prabhupada's books, That's wonderful. Let's develop this vision. And then this verse, okay, yeah, but it's not just about a vision. It's much fuller than that. Like that actually, I have a vision. You're not the body or spirit soul, but actually that every spirit soul is dear to me. And I'm like, I feel the pain when you're feeling the pain because you're dear to me. And when you're feeling joy, then I'm happy for you because it's a true spiritual emotional connection, soul to soul. And that's what this verse opens the door to that experience. Thank you, Govinda. Bhakta George.
Hare Krishna, David. I guess I have a comment, maybe question on the idea of service, of doing our dharma. Because much of what we've been talking about, kind of the Vedic perspective, is the idea of coming from a standpoint of I'm not qualified, and my service and serving others is maybe elevating my consciousness, purifying my consciousness. We talk about the diamond and all that. And, we have Bhaktisiddhanta who says, perfect and complete, right? The world stands in no need of a reformer, and the reformation is our own if we see it out there. And so when we think about service, I guess from the Vedic perspective, I feel like this sense of kind of not being qualified to go out and do whatever, whereas someone very dear to my family who comes from a more like a Christian background, they're like, oh, it's my job to go and fight racism or sexism or all the things. But it almost feels like coming from a paradigm of like, I know that, it's like I know, and so it's like, how does one bridge that? Or because my background thing is like, well, the best way to solve, and I don't have any realized knowledge, which I guess is why I keep struggling with this point, especially with this loved family member, is I'm like, well, if we just serve God, but I don't know. And then they're like, no, but we have to, we serve God by going and helping the whoever X, Y, and Z. So it's kind of like how to reconcile the, I guess it's the difference of philosophy maybe, but this was kind of present with me thinking about Dharma. And it's like, my understanding is when we get to that level of like a pure devotee, then it just becomes obvious and you can just touch hearts and change minds. But it's very difficult to, maybe, at least for me right now, associating with this dear family member in bridging that gap of it's kind of perfect and complete and let's work on ourselves kind of narrative.
Thanks for sharing. I hear a wise response to your own question as you kind of unfolded your sharing there. That that everything's perfect and complete, and let's not resist reality. And part of in that container of perfection and completeness, there's me and what's my service? And in engaging in my service with full enthusiasm, my service on all levels, my service in fulfilling my vow to chant Hare Krishna Maha Mantra rounds every day, my service to care for my family, my service in the organization that I'm employed with, whatever. That in giving 100% enthusiasm, because perfect and complete doesn't mean, so what's the point of doing anything? Perfect and complete doesn't mean like it's an excuse for laziness, for resignation, for let me just go to sleep for 15 hours and hide under the covers. Everything's complete and perfect anyway. No, perfect and complete means with full enthusiasm, I do my service, full joy, full enthusiasm, And it means that I'm not attached to the results. It means whatever the results are, whether it comes out the way I was envisioning or not, the way I wrote the script or not, that I continue with enthusiasm. That's real freedom. That whatever praise or insult I get, whatever happens in the economy, whatever happens with health, that's freedom. I'm free to continue to serve Krishna with enthusiasm. And so, and we, okay, that the results didn't come out the way I planned, or they came out more than I planned or less. Everything's perfect and complete. And let me continue to cultivate my relationship with Krishna, with Srila Prabhupada, by engaging in service. Yeah, and then I really like the way you framed your expression, George, that because, so like you're in interaction with a family member, and so sometimes perfect and complete means like, okay, let me really, let me not resist, let me accept this, let me appreciate. Here's someone who wants to use his or her life to fight against injustice. Maybe they have whatever spiritual realization they have or not. Okay, so they want to serve something bigger than themselves. Let me appreciate them. Let me appreciate them. Let me celebrate their actions. They're not settling for a sub-mediocre life of gross materialistic selfishness. They want to serve humanity and fight oppression and injustice. Okay, yeah. So then there's a time. Let me empathize and celebrate and appreciate. And as the saying goes, people don't care what you know till they know that you care. People don't care what you know till they know that you care. And then maybe with feeling understood and empathized, and maybe after that, maybe the next day or 10 years later, then maybe there will be more of an opening to hear transcendental knowledge about the spirit soul, and how that actually, well, this idea, the principle of fighting, against all the isms, the principle, we can understand the humanity there. At the same time, and then that's our discretion, when to share an alternate perspective for your consideration, when to simply be in your world and appreciate your world. This is using discretion. This is using intelligence, time, circumstance. And then maybe there's a time where we share that actually, just like if we start with the wrong numbers and we go through a 10-step equation, even if we follow the steps, it's not going to come out well. So it's like if in one sense, if I start with, you're Italian, you're white, you're black, I'm Arab, you're Jew, you're Greek, you're American, you're female, you're male. And so let's serve in harmony and synergy. In one sense, that's going to be a losing proposition, because we're starting with illusion. We're starting with the wrong numbers. We're starting with the illusion that I am this car. And this car, we call this car white, late 50s, American. We call that car Japanese or Latino or whatever. And but actually we're not the car. And until we get that, there's always going to be conflict based on it. It's like we're starting with the wrong numbers. So there might be a time to use those analogies to the extent where someone's open. And as we know that to create openness and trust and just open-mindedness to hear other perspectives, that often comes by not praising them to flatter them, to manipulate, but empathy, understanding, sincere appreciation. And then naturally there's more of an environment to exchange views and openness to perhaps a larger perspective. I don't know if I responded to your question. I think you responded to your question well enough. Dr. George.
Yeah, thank you, David. I appreciate so much your focus on using discretion to meet them where they're at. and not let my feelings of seeing someone I care about struggling get in the way of allowing for that openness that kind of inspires people to come to their own realizations. Like I'm appreciating, not letting my feelings of love and care for them, seeing them struggle with whatever they're trying to do, get in the way of just meeting them where they're at, empathizing with them, and just waiting for the right time to point out maybe certain flaws in the equation. So thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, George. Payal.
I'm appreciating class, and I'm appreciating, I'm kind of meditating on when you said, having like a realization, when you said the process of birth and death. And I spend a lot of time thinking about death. Like I think I've had a big attachment to what will happen after death and what's gonna come of this body. And I know we study about that we're not this body, but until today, and even part of the verse is like being attached, until you said this process.
The process.
It felt so like I experienced less attachment to what unfolds. It felt like, it's a process. Like, we're going to be constantly changing, clothes and birth and death, and it comes back to trusting Krishna and trusting in his process of my soul, not of this life. Like I think I've created it like this life is the most important life ever, and versus this is my life currently.
This is part of my process.
This is part of my soul's process, and there are things happening that I have no idea about. That my soul is needing to experience in this process. That it's happening for this process, and there will be another process. Versus, I think I've just always had such an attachment to death.
Yeah, in hearing you share, Payal, I mean, like the consciousness or the language of like, I'm going to die, I'm dying, I'm old, like that. Whereas I'm hearing when you hear that language and the consciousness behind it, we're involved in a process of birth, death, old age, disease. Then there's naturally more of a sort of liberating non-attachment. Okay, kind of like, here I am as a spirit soul, and I'm involved in a process. It's not this finality, I'm dying now, or I'm going to die, fear, like that. It's transformation.
Yes, it removes the fear. And then the other thing that I really appreciated today is we talk a lot about service and being in service to Krishna. And I think today, hearing not only are we in service to Krishna, but we're in service to Krishna to serve others, to realize that they're spirit soul. I was missing that part of to serve others, to realize that they are spirit soul. I'm still like experiencing that part.
Right, but it's somewhat of a fresh piece for you.
Yes. Like to be in service is one thing, but then to serve others, to help them come to that realization. I feel like it's opening a very different consciousness for me. I've been intending to step more into service of Krishna. Like, what does Krishna want my service to be? But I had not included that part to support others, to help them remember that they're spirit soul. So I'm appreciating that. So thank you very much.
Thanks for sharing, Payal. Thank you. Right at the end of Bhagavad Gita, towards the end of the 18th chapter, not chatasma manusheshu, Krishna says, and that one who's giving themselves to support others to realize that they're spirit souls and they're servants of God. Krishna says, no one's more dear to me than that person. So, yeah, I'm moved by the connections you're making and the doors you're opening. And kind of, I have a sense that, like, from your sharing, you kind of know you're going to be more and more impacted by this as days and weeks go on. Thank you, Paya.
Krishna.
Ladini Shakti.
I'm appreciating the conversation. I'm glad that Garuda Prabhu brought up the Vidya Vinaya Sampane. That's my favorite verse. It allows me to have a dog and feel good about it. And and today the whole day I was thinking how I want to like redirect preaching efforts from people to animals. And I will take your class as a confirmation about like the speciesism. So anyway, so I was like, I ordered like, how much is it? 40 pounds of carrots. And I plan to do like pressure down distribution for cows and horses. So thanks for encouraging me.
Glad to serve you in your service. And I'm hearing you're getting confirmation, deeper enthusiasm to distribute massive tons of carrot prasadam to horses.
Haribo!
Exactly, actually, and I was thinking that every time I give them the carrot, I will say Haribo, and I will condition them to remember that like hearing Haribo is like the best thing.
Hare.
You get it. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Ladini Shakti. Daru Brahma. Oh, I see.
Okay, can you hear me? Right?
Yes.
So I was just saying, I'm sure that I haven't been around you for years, but you must have talked about the basic analogy of this world to a prison house, right?
Which analogy?
This world is a huge prison house.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, of course. And so, and I was just thinking, it reminded me when we were just talking there that there's many things you can do in the prison house. And one thing is maybe make license plates, maybe wash the clothes of the other inmates, maybe be a cook in there, whatever. But if you're the one, well, what if you're the inmate who says, you know what? I would like to get these guys to change their hearts so they become good citizens again and have a real life, not just stay in prison all the time. I mean, you are the dearest person to the prison. You are the person that they most want to encourage because you are actually doing the job of the real prison, you know? And so Krishna will obviously feel the most toward you and encourage you the most if you will actually encourage others to realize, hey, you're not supposed to be a prisoner. There's a real world outside, you know, and you got to just change your heart a little bit. That's all. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you, Dara Brahmaprabhu. That's a wonderful analogy, and I like how you express it, that sure, within the prison we can serve, and the prisoners might do some service, but the real thing, the real purpose is to support them to really rehabilitate your criminal mentality and connect with truly wanting to be a contributing citizen outside of the prison house, contribute to society without criminal mentality. That's the real purpose of the prison, and to serve that real purpose, then we become most dear to the prisoners, to the warden, to the governor. I like that analogy. Thank you, Dara.
Yeah.
Damayanti.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, everyone. I'm just appreciating the connection to what Garuda shared and what we just recently discussed about being dear. So there's there's feeling genuine, sweet love and care for every living entity. And then there's Krishna's feeling of a special sweetness towards the devotee who shares Krishna consciousness or shares spiritual knowledge. So anyway, I just like how the conversation today discussed this tenderness and dearness, and I feel deeply. I just love this quality of the soul, dearness. I just like. Well, it's just it's love, it's really like, it's real love, and it's, I mean, so many, every spiritual path acknowledges that love is like one of the core special qualities of the soul. And to really access it it's really like the most satisfying. It's the most satisfying feeling to feel, like that genuine care and love. Like it's and we also hear quotes in our discussions about like love is an action and it's service. It's so, yeah, I mean, I guess like the feeling of being loving or genuine deep care for Krishna and for his children, you can just experience it. But naturally what follows is action, and naturally that action looks like service, spiritual service, really. Anyway, I just really love it, and I'm touched by our personal path. This is like a path of personalism, seeing each individual, seeing the supreme personality of God. It's just like so much more satisfying than like an impersonal practice, because sometimes those impersonal practices don't activate that core quality of the soul, which is just like genuine love. So, and I mean, when I was atheist, I didn't have God at all in my consciousness. I mean, I knew that love, that, being loving, experiencing loving feelings was a core human attribute. You could see it you could see it with, if you don't have the soul vision. So anyway, I'm very pleased and grateful for your association, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, Damayanti. Hare Krishna. Yeah, I'm very touched by how you're touched by this personal process of bhakti yoga. Yeah, and that loving feeling and experience. That's what it's all about. That experience. That's what it's all about. Now, again, because sometimes we stress that love is an action, love is shown in service. But it's true that experience, it's the spiritual feeling, not material love, which is really lust in disguise, but a spiritual feeling of the love of the soul for other souls and for God, for Krishna. That's what it's all about. That's why we do these morning programs. That's what japa is about. Now, sometimes we hesitate to focus on that love's what it's all about, because it can sound sentimental, and it could one could misunderstand that to mean like, well, there's no reason to do the hard work of sadhana bhakti. It's all about love, which is true in a sense. But the idea is to rigorously follow the regulations of sadhana bhakti. Then we steadily come, at the home ashram of Govinda and Damayanti. Many years ago, we gave that class. It was entitled States and Stages of Consciousness. And so by performing sadhana bhakti according to the directions of someone who's in love with Krishna, in love with Arjuna, dear to all living entities, dear to Srila Prabhupada, and we follow his guidelines, then we experience all that is in the way of that spiritual loving feeling dissipating, getting eliminated, and all of the lust and greed and ignorance in our heart going away. And just like this, even the beginning of the sun rising in the morning, just a few rays of the sun dissipates the darkness of night. So that's not necessarily full love, but it's freedom from fear, and it's a foundation for shining. And then we continue to practice, and it's like the sun shining in the noon sky. And that's the full blazing love of the soul all living entities and for Krishna. And so all of the sadhana bhakti, studying Prabhupada's books, the kirtan programs, prasad, distributing carrots to horses, prasadam carrots. It's all about developing that dear feeling of the soul. Thank you, Damayanti.
Hi, Krishna.
Danielle.
I thought to share, I had a public speaking class and we needed to do a persuasive argument that was polarizing. That was the assignment. And so I picked vegetarianism because I thought that fit the bill. And I put together a bunch of quotes from the Bible and from civil rights leaders who were very active on this topic. And I think the two things that were so impactful in that presentation, in addition to those, were your article on speciesism and social work, because you went into such depth. I really appreciate the work that you did on that. And the other thing that was really impactful, I think, was following Prabhupada's advice to not put a bunch of really violent images in the presentation. And at the end of it, you know, it was a short presentation, maybe 6 minutes. People in the class were just giving me feedback immediately, like, wow, I really had no interest in what you were presenting. I really thought you were just going to stand up there for 6 minutes and I was just going to kind of tune out and not have anything going on for me. And even the professor took time to recount a story about how he killed this frog because his girlfriend wanted him to. And, you know, she was afraid of the frog, and how for like weeks after killing the frog, he would walk past its dead body and think, oh, it's so beautiful and I can't believe that I killed it. And like, it really touched him. And so I guess what I'm hearing in the sharing today is, what I learned is when we're talking to people, we can use everything that we've heard from everyone that came before us, and we can do it in a way that isn't violent or scary or hurtful or making other people feel bad or guilty. It can be a loving interaction. So I don't know, I guess that's what's coming up for me, is how do I always present myself in that way? You know, how do I always lean on to Prabhupada and people who have more realized knowledge in these areas to become dear to everyone by expressing myself in a way that benefits everybody? Yeah.
Thank you, Danielle. I appreciate your sharing very much. I'm glad that the social work and speciesism article was helpful, impactful. And I really appreciate that you took shelter of Srila Prabhupada's approach. Yeah, he didn't want that, like in his magazine, you know, there would be brutal pictures of slaughterhouses and things like that. No, you know, convince people with personal experience, with logic, with rationale, touch their heart, not the ghastliness. So I appreciate very much how you prepared and presented your presentation. I appreciate that in that university setting, how your dedication to in a refined, intelligent way to share these principles of sattvic living and transcendental process. I'm very glad to hear them. And Lady Shakti writes, I would be glad to hear the presentation, Danielle. Hare Krishna.
I can send you.
Me too.
Okay, I'll send you the slides.
Well, it's not an article. It's just slides. It's not an article. It's a bunch of slides.
It was a PowerPoint presentation that went along with a presentation that I gave, like a speech in a public speaking course.
Oh, but I meant Dear Govinda's thing. That was just an article, right? There's no slides with that.
Correct.
Right? Okay.
Yeah, my article is called Social Work and Speciesism.
Was that easily found somewhere?
Yeah, if you want to send me an email, I'll send it to you.
Okay, great.
I would be happy if you both want to send your presentation and article in an email to us all.
Thank
Hey,
you.
one other thing, Prabhu.
Okay, Dhira.
What she was just presenting was interesting because it reminded me that my Sridhananamar is always told by Prabhupada, do not present Krishna consciousness as a bunch of rules and regulations. And yet, and he says, and unfortunately, look at how many Sunday feast lectures are, yeah, no meat, fish, chicken, or eggs, no such, you know, especially in the college system. He said, present it as the greatest philosophy, but don't present it as a bunch of rules and regulations. And so I just thought, I just want to pass it on as another major way to not present Krishna consciousness in that way, similarly. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dhira. Yeah. Prabhupada emphasized it. This is the science. It's a science of self-realization. As I know myself, like if people say, "Oh, are you a Hare Krishna?" My internal and external response is like, "No, I do not identify myself as a Hare Krishna. I don't."
Amen. Amen, brother.
I practice, or I endeavor to practice a process, a science of self-realization. And you can call this process, this science, Bhakti Yoga, you can call it Krishna consciousness. So it's a science, it's not like, yeah, I've never been interested in joining a group or getting others to join a group. Okay, I am enthused to support and inspire others to in self-discovery and to give themselves to a science of self-realization, a science of self-discovery that actually produces experiential results, that actually produces transformation of heart. Bhagavad Gita ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. Hare Krishna. Thanks for your association.
Hare Krishna.